Hey there, I'm Nicole Wilbur. I'm a writer and story nerd, and welcome back to my channel. I am so excited today because I've been spending the last month using 3 different methods to write my scenes. So typically as a writer, I am an outliner, I will say it, so I write my outline, usually just like a sentence or 2 per scene, and then when I sit down to actually write the scene, I've been trying different ways. So I've been trying just writing the scene right off the bat. I've been trying doing a headlining, outlining, scripting sort of method as method number 2, and then I tried doing a scene summary before I sat down to write it. And I am sharing the results of that experiment with you today. At the very end, I will tell you which method I liked the best. So let's jump right into it. The first way is to just jump right in and write it. This is the method that I used a lot in NaNoWriMo, and I used when I was writing the first draft of 1837 because it's fast. You have your 1 to 2 sentences and you just jump right in and write it. So an example of this is, or the thing that I would write off of, is this. Greer asks father about the land but gets extremely flustered. She encounters Branagh on the stairs as she leaves the office. And in this scene, I wouldn't write this down necessarily, but I would know in my head kind of like what the purpose is because I came up with that while I was outlining. So this scene in particular, I know the purpose is to establish a source of antagonism in the father and his like friend group. It's a big defining moment in Greer's character arc. It's actually like the before moment. And I made the resolution of the scene happen on the stairs. I thought about that ahead of time in order to save time so I don't need to do another scene where Greer tells Branagh what happened in the office. So she can kind of recount it just at the end of this scene rather than having to like find another place for them to meet and doing a whole other scene. So at that point, I would just sit down on my computer and write the scene. So pros and cons of this method. Pro number 1 is it's the fastest. You sit down with your scene statement and you get straight to the prose. So I use this for 1837 and I also used it for my novella when I was doing a 12-hour write-a-thon, and I wrote 8,000 words in the 12 hours. I also outlined the novella, and then I wrote like 5,000 words the next day. So it's about 12,000 words. And the scenes happened very quickly. The con to this method is that the scene is much more likely to go off the rails. So going back to the scene statement that I suggested before, like what is she going to ask her father? What is she going to talk to them about? What is she going to say to Branagh on the stairs? Why won't the father give the information? Like all these different things, they can come out in the writing of this scene, obviously. But sometimes if you don't know the answers to those questions ahead of time, it can really go off the rails. So this method worked really well in the novella because I had a very detailed outline for that and an extremely focused story. Like when I sat down to write those scenes, especially the later ones, I had the whole story very like visualized. I could visualize it in my head. I knew exactly what happened. So it was super fast. I felt like I was just getting the story out. With a 100,000 word novel, which is what 1837 was and is going to be 100,000 words again apparently, there's room for exploration, which is great. But things are a bit less precise. So in a novel, you don't always know what is going to happen in your scene. That's totally normal because you don't go down to that level of detail in your outline because otherwise maybe you'd just be writing the scene. But this has led to wandering scenes, scenes that don't linearly build conflict, scenes where the characters' motivations aren't clear, scenes that include too many elements or that just don't accomplish what I set out to accomplish. And I think that using the just right method for 1837 was a big reason why I ended up scrapping the entire 100,000 words and saying, let's do it again. Method number 2 is, I call it dialogue first or headlining or screenplay scripting. So I got this method from a Magical Cookies blog by Susan Dennard on her website. I will link it below. She has a great website. This blog series is awesome. A headline, outline, or screenplay includes the major actions that are being taken in the scene, dialogue, and maybe some details about setting. So I have an example of my own headline outlining here. So the original scene statement I had was, Aggie has tea with the headmaster's daughter. She has to get the information she wants. It was a little more specific than that, but I'm trying to avoid spoilers. And this was really an exposition scene. So here is my script. So that's an excerpt from one of my scene snippet scripts. No prose, pretty much no dialogue tags. You can't really tell who's talking. Sometimes if there are more than 2 characters in a scene, I'll put their name next to their dialogue just to make it clear. Pros and cons to that one. Pro, writing the script is a lot faster than starting with prose, and it's also easier to see the shape of the scene. So you can see how the action is rising and falling. You can see it and you can shape it better in that form where it's just kind of like dialogue and major beats to make sure that you have your like shape. And it's more difficult to see that when it's really muddled up in prose. So it saves time in terms of like giving a good scene construction. The con is, depending on how detailed you make the script, it can feel like you're writing the whole scene twice. And this is what I felt quite a bit. I spend half of one writing session maybe writing the script. It takes like 30 minutes, and my writing sessions are an hour to an hour and a half. And then sometimes you spend a full writing session, an hour to an hour and a half, writing the actual scene. But some of the fun has gone out of it because I love dialogue. So it felt a little bit repetitive, like, why am I doing this again? You're just kind of filling in the blanks. Sometimes, though, I do find it is a bit difficult to fill in the prose, and I sometimes end up with like fairly dialogue-heavy scenes, because as I was writing all the dialogue, I was like, hey, everything you need to know is just right here in this dialogue. Like, what do I need to add to this? And that's not bad per se, but it annoys me a bit, because then I feel like the focus of the scene is a little bit off. Jumping in to say, if you got this far in the video, please consider giving it a big thumbs up. It helps me out a lot, and definitely comment down below if this is helpful, if you like this kind of content, because that gives me an idea on what to write, or because that gives me an idea on what kind of videos I should make next. All right, let's keep on going with this. Method number 3 is doing a detailed summary. So I've heard other people talk about this method before, but it's specifically for me. It's my own version of what's advised in the Snowflake method and also in the scene construction chapter of the Anatomy of Story. So basically, I write a paragraph that describes what happens in the scene in more detail than my 1 to 2 sentences. So usually in my 1 to 2 sentences, I'm missing specifics such as like, how do they escape from the castle? Or how do they trick the guard? What do they find in the office? What are they arguing about? What do they want in this scene? What's the conflict? So I write that out in the scene summary. So for this scene summary, it was Aggie storms to UCC, which is Upper Canada College, and speaks to Drew, ... turns into a sweet and fun moment. This is part of the fun and games section from the Save the Cat beats. And so this is what my summary looked like. You'll see that I have some dialogue mixed in here too, because I just felt like it was easier to, I just knew what the dialogue was. And I figured I'd include it here because you can always mix and match these things. Obviously, I have my own shorthand. They're saying, fine, we'll be proper, and then they end happily. So not very sophisticated. It's not in any specific format, like beginning, middle, end, or writing out the beats, but it does give me a lot more detail and structure to work with than the original sentence. So pro, writing the scene description is generally faster than doing a script, and it allows me to figure out what is happening in the scene, beginning, middle, end, basically, although I don't necessarily have to do it by that structure. I write out basically what I don't know about the scene in the paragraph form. It centers my thinking without taking away the fun of the scene. The con is if the summary isn't good, if it doesn't actually address what you don't know and sort of fill in the blanks and give you the structure, the scene won't be good. And so is there any way to write a perfect summary? No. How do you know if the summary isn't good? I think it depends on the scene and the writer, because some people will need to write down certain things where others won't. Like, I inherently know the purposes of all of my scenes, even though I don't necessarily write them down. I have it in the back of my head. But if you're new to writing, or if sometimes you tend to go off the rails, writing down the purpose of the scene and the overall story can be very helpful. For me, I have to write down more of the micro details because those are the things that I don't know. And in my next video, I'm going to be talking about the 3 major pitfalls that I have made in writing scenes. So I'm going to get a little bit more into like what makes a good scene and what you might be missing in a summary. look out for that video. And if you aren't subscribed to my channel, do that so you can see when that video comes out. So which is better? In the end, I do a combination of scripting and summarizing. Sometimes if the scene is just like dying to get out of my fingertips and I want to get the idea down fast, I'll do the script version. Or if I'm especially unsure of what is happening in the scene and how the conflict is going to play out, I might also do the script version. More recently, I've been doing the detailed summary with a few notes, like on the central conflict or bits of dialogue that pop up. In my outline, actually, I do have like bits of dialogue that came to me while I was writing it, so I'll kind of take those, move them over, and just make sure that I know what is happening in the scene. So I would love to know, how do you write your scenes? Do you just go for it? Do you do some sort of outlining before you write? And when do you figure that out? Do you figure that out before you start writing or kind of in the middle? Do you do it in revision? I'm really, really interested to hear it. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. That helps so much. And I will see you next time.